Так, доброго дня.
Good afternoon, dear participants of this round table. We are going to speak about management of resources of communities. This is a very important issue. And land management in communities, this is a reality for someone, and others are only dream about this and believe that there is a myth about it. I'm Katerina, and I'm a specialist in land management, and during today's discussion, we have representatives of local self-government bodies, bodies of executive power, experts, and members of communities. Why this topic of land management is so important for us today? Today's roundtable will be dedicated to support land reform, complex reform, concerning provision of responsibilities to communities to manage their territories and to protect the interests of local self-government concerning land management. And we are going to speak about the law that is called by many as land constitution, to introduce some changes to law in order to improve management in the sphere of land, and draft law 2194, and now this is law 1423. And this is land decentralization, why it is important. And the land market is going to be introduced, and we should consider this law in together with other laws. And USA Dobra supports us, and it helped 75 communities to develop their capabilities in order to promote self-governance, planning, strategic planning. And Dobra program is directed to develop and to provide better services, to popularize best practices in order that people in amalgamated communities be more capable to manage their territory, in order that they be able to participate in management of lands of communities. And we have speakers today, and this is Brian Campbell, head of Dobra program, Shershov Sergei Ivanovich, who is online, director of General Directorate on Local Self-Government, Territorial Organization of Power and Administrative and Territorial Division. Anatoly Miroshnichenko, First Deputy of State Service on Geodesy, Cartography and Cadastre. Tatiana Нужда, Expert Moderator of the platforms, Rural Development, All Ukrainian Association of All ETCs, Ksenia Druzhenina, Deputy Head of All Ukrainian Union of Certified Engineers, of Land Engineers, Roman Kaznanetsky, Head of Lanovetska Territorial Community, and Galina Reshitnyak, Novoproska Territorial Community. He is a lead specialist, and they will be online with us. So we are going to start, dear colleagues. And I would like to stress one thing. As of today, we are living in the epoch of reforms, and we all believe that those changes that were started, they should really contribute to our citizens who live in rural areas, to prevent outflow of people from rural areas. This time of reform, this is for learning and time of constant improvement, and this is also time of big opportunities for our communities. And I give the floor to Brian Campbell in order to tell us about those impressions of the reforms that are ongoing in Ukraine. I give the floor to Brian Campbell.
I'm glad you could be with us this morning. On behalf of the Dobre Project, I'd like to thank all of the distinguished officials and experts who are taking part in leading this discussion today. As you probably know, the Dobre Project is funded by USAID, has been working in Ukraine since 2016. As Ms. Reznikova said, we have worked with 75 communities in seven oblasts, and currently are working with an additional 25 in 3 additional oblasts. The goal of the Dobre project is to help the communities emerging from decentralization to deal with, handle the challenges, and take advantage of the opportunities that decentralization brings. And we'll see today in discussing land management issues that this is both a challenge and an opportunity for communities. Much of the land that's been transferred to communities recently as part of the decentralization process is burdened by leaseholds that are not profitable for the community or requires technical boundaries, meets and bounds to be established for the properties so that they can be registered in the cadastre. In some cases, there are informal uses of the land that need to be addressed. These are all challenges that face the communities in assuming ownership and management of the lands. At the same time, it's clearly an opportunity for them to have these lands so they can use them to pursue their own policies and decisions to improve their community and the lives of their citizens. In this connection, I'd like to say that, in my view, the decentralization process is of historic proportions for Ukraine. I think it's a natural outgrowth or continuation of Ukraine's commitment to democratization, democratic processes, rule of law, and civil society, and a break from the Soviet past. It seems most natural to me that that citizens should have a voice in the affairs of their country, their nation, and that begins at the local level, where they live, work, where their children attend school, where they seek medical care, and so forth. So transferring power to the communities is a major step in the overall process and transformation that Ukraine is going through, and I think it's a wonderful thing. It's important to enable the communities to succeed in this, because that will transform the society further and have benefits throughout the entire country. So in that connection, I have two suggestions to make to the national policymakers. The first is that as obligations are transferred to communities, it's essential that mechanisms or resources be created or found, transferred, to enable the communities to deal with those assets, those challenges, those new responsibilities. That should be a fundamental part of any transfer. And the transfer should go forward. The second point is that we have seen in our work in Dobre that many of the rural consolidated communities really have no economic base at all. So it's unrealistic to expect them to be able to handle these new challenges and opportunities without assistance from the state. So while I know there are funds available for communities that they can compete for, if you will, there's a huge need, I think, for funding just to help bring many of these communities up to the level where they could begin to compete. So I hope that policymakers will keep that in mind going forward. Thank you for your attention. I hope this is a useful and productive session we have today.
Дякуємо дуже за такі.
Thank you very much for your confidence and reform. Thank you for supporting our communities, because it's very important to know that, first of all, we have got methodological support, and the Ukrainian path is a long path to go. And the opportunities that local communities face, they at the same time are the challenges. And I'm happy to invite to the microphone Mr. Sharshov Sergei, Director General of the Directorate of Local Self-Governments and Territorial Subdivision. It looks like today, now, the decentralization reform starts to flourish. What do I mean to flourish, because for a long period of time the decentralization reform was believed to be the reform of administrative and territorial division, while today we observe the quality changes. Sergei, how do you think whether our communities will be able to cope with the responsibility which they have faced today? And how do you think what should be their first steps, and what algorithm might be the most productive for them? Thank you for invitation. On behalf of the ministry, I would like to welcome all the participants of today's discussion. On the other hand, I would like to thank to the Dobra program, which had become our reliable partner in implementation of the decentralization reform, and for organization of today's event. I believe that such events are very necessary and very productive for our communities. As for the draft law number 1423, which is now under discussion in the Parliament, I would like to mention that the Charter of local self-governments provides for comprehensive self-governments everywhere. And by now, unfortunately, this was not fully implemented. That is, the powers of the local governments were limited exclusively with the territory of their settlements. And this draft law will, when it is passed as a law, it will allow the local communities to become true owners of their lands within their territory. And immediately after passage of the law, our ministry has drafted the bylaws, and our experts believe that in first turn, the local governments will need to establish, to create new authorities inside themselves, which will be responsible for the land management, that is, management of the lands owned by the community. And of course, they will need to have specific expertise like land management, architecture, construction, etc. The second aspect of the novelty is that we need to maintain proper land registers. And this requires the availability of specialists familiar with geo-cadastral, land skills. And the third step is that those administrators of land resources in local communities which will be established, they will get access to the National Register of Land Resources. And additionally, perhaps the land measuring and land registration inside the local communities should be carried out. This new inventory of lands today would require again, on the one hand, a good specialist. On the other hand, this would be possible to be done via online resources. And according to our assumptions, this would require not more than 2 weeks of work. Then the next step is to decide about the functional designation of each land plot within the local community, and also to set boundaries of the local communities. This new law allows us to establish such boundaries, and this will resolve a lot of issues. As of now, frankly speaking, we do not have so many claims from local communities about the boundaries, but nevertheless, there are some territories which disputable territories between several local communities where some part of this or that territory or land is subject to the dispute between two communities. So this new law would allow us to resolve such disputes. Then the law would allow us to resolve the issue of central supervision and control over the use of the lands of local communities in line with the designation. And of course, the spreading of such supervisory and controlling functions at the local level will be very useful for the local authorities. I would like to draw attention of the local governments to that big responsibility which will be brought together with all those powers which I have just mentioned. Besides that, this new law would allow to remeasure, to re-register the exact size of each land plot, and thus to specify more clearly the amount of taxes to be taken and to be paid by each local community for this land. So we have prepared the list of all these steps, and we will post it on our website. And we have also prepared instructions for the local governments how to implement this law properly, and we hope that local communities and the leaders of local communities would take proactive position and would eagerly take this new law to the implementation, because on this successful implementation, the whole fate of our decentralization reform will depend. Sergei, thank you so much, but I would like to ask a question about the indices of the communities' capacities, which is presented on your web portal. How do you think whether the law will promote this further? If we think about land resources, we clearly understand that these are land resources which actually back up the financial resources of local authorities, and of course those indices of resource availability and economic development would now be able to compare their own land resources with the land resources of neighboring communities, of other communities, and this would allow the local governments to understand better how to manage properly those land resources, how to use them efficiently and get better revenues as in taxes for them. I believe that this will very positively influence the local communities and will push them up to the new evaluation and assessment of their capacity against all other communities in Ukraine. And I strongly believe that this will improve considerably the managerial decisions, especially when the local communities will think about land taxes and land management. Thank you so much. I believe that this will be very useful for the local communities in terms of sharing experiences and best practices. They will be able to compare their capacity to manage land resources and to go to that communities where they have better practice. Thank you so much. And on behalf of myself, I would like to encourage the local communities who watch us now. I would like to encourage you to ask your questions online, and we will try either to answer them orally or to answer them in writing. So the next speaker is a representative of the state geocadastre of Ukraine, and this is the responsibility of the geocadastre in course of this land management reform is huge, and the role of geocadastre is to become transparent and efficient body, and I'm happy to introduce Anatoly Miрошnichenko, first deputy head of the State Service of Ukraine on geocadastre and cartography.
So you are a practitioner on this panel, so we have some questions to you that relate to handing over all land to communities and introduction of law 1423. So this law is signed, and this handing over of lands happened, and how this process will continue, and how communities should manage their lands, whether people should address the state cadastre on this issue. Good afternoon. Thank you for your question. The answer about communal property, how this land go to this communal property. So there are two situations. First, some lands are not formed. There are no cadastre numbers. They are not registered in state cadastre. And they are without state property, so they go to communal property. when the law enters into force, and about formed land plots that should be provided to communal property. And there is the state property right that is registered. So this so in this, everything depends on the bodies of local power, how they organize the process of registration of communal property. And the basis for this is law. And before the moment of such a registration, the lands remain in state property, and respective bodies, including state cadastre, they cannot manage this land. So there is a transitional period before the registration of the right of communal property. And we have some more questions to you. One of these questions: what are the procedures that should be carried out by the community in order to understand that this is the territory they can manage? Why this is important? Because in many cases, communities ask that some state lands, they are not registered in the cadastre, and they face such a situation that, for example, they cannot manage it properly because they didn't know that this is the state land or land of some enterprise, because there are many enterprises that are being liquidated or were liquidated. So what is the practice on this? Thank you. I believe that we've provided this answer. Mr. Sharshov said about the need of inventory, and the communities, they should carry out inventory of their lands, and this correct inventarization will provide answer to this. And you are absolutely right. Unfortunately, we have some situations that it looks that a land plot belongs to no one, and there is no information on this land plot in state cadastre. It is not entered in this cadastre, and there is no record in state cadastre of asset rights, but in 1970s, 80s, 1990s, or 2021, for example, the right for the use for this land appeared, and there is a right for permanent use, for example, or a land plot was handed over to citizens, and the right may be established in some books, in some record books, and there are documents that do not have the boundaries, the limits, and these boundaries should be identified. So there are many problematic issues. And first, the inventarization should happen, and then we will be given with the right answer. One more question that I want to voice about control over the use of lands. And Sergei also mentioned this. This may help us fill the budgets and to improve lands and to prevent negative phenomena, and some wastage may be prevented in Ukraine. And when will this function go to communities, and how to deal with the situation properly in order to respond quickly? And law 1423 provides such opportunities to control and protect lands, and these norms will enter into force in a year. And these responsibilities are not automatically transferred, but proper decisions should be taken by local self-government bodies. And also, the law, it should enter into force, and then organizational structure should be formed, and we need to have state inspectors who will deal with the use and protection of lands, and this work should be done in order to carry out control functions. That's why the last one and the most important for communities. First, they should look whether they have opportunities, whether they have resources to hire qualified specialists that will carry out the state control. If they have such an opportunity, and if benefit exceeds the expenditures that should be made. So after the law enters into force and the norm of law and state control over the use and protection of lands, and also provision of the Code on Administrative Violations, when these norms enter into force, they should take proper decisions and to carry out organizational actions. So about the function of inspectors, maybe they may provide this function to the person who is responsible for lands in the territorial community. I'm not ready to answer this, whether these positions may be within the responsibility of one person. Article 9 on state control over the use and protection of lands. Some changes were introduced into this article, and also the status was changed, the status of inspection from control over the use and protection of lands. So I'm not ready to say about these changes. This issue should be clarified. Thank you very much for your answers, and some questions were received from communities. We accumulate these questions, and now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Lanovetska territorial community, and he is with us online. This is head of Lanovetska territorial community of Ternopilska Oblast, Roman Koznovetsky. And I would like to say that this community, due to Dobre program, they were able to implement spatial planning. And Roman, are you with us?
Can you hear me? Good afternoon. Yes, we can hear you and can see you. As far as I know, you have implemented this project on spatial planning in your community, and that is, you have some experience. What would you advise to those who are starting this process? First of all, I would like to emphasize that this project about spatial planning, it deals with the territory and with the lands which belong to the local community, and it immediately brings to the light all those spots which are omitted or which are not properly coordinated in the previous documents, and by the way, when together with the Dobre program we had launched this project, we found very interesting perspectives, very interesting future prospects when the experts had studied our lands. They were able to advise to us about better infrastructural solutions, about better lands for investment solutions, and for example, they advised us about old roads which remained neglected for a long period of time. They advised what to do with them and how to repair them properly and how to use. And at the same time, doing that, reviewing all the land resources, we had developed the plan how those lands could be used. And thus, that 22,000 of people who currently reside on our territory has got new perspectives for the development. That was about land use. What were the main problems or issues which you faced carrying out that project on spatial development? As far as I know, many communities mentioned data collection. Was it the issue for you? And what could you recommend? How to collect the information? At what stage of the project implementation, and what prospects for the future does this open? First of all, your own land subdivision in the local government has to be established prior to this land planning, and it has to work in very close cooperation with those authorities who will come to help you. And moreover, you should know your lands very well and present them to those experts who will come to carry out this spatial development, and they will provide to you very good advice, I can assure you. As far as I know, in order to make this spatial development successful, you have to present the list of your needs or the list of your expectations to the experts. On the other hand, sometimes local authorities, local governments experienced the biggest difficulties with the involvement of and satisfaction of the investors, potential investors. So my question to you, how did you manage to balance the interests of the investors with this spatial development plan? We found out that we have to work very closely. Although I won't keep saying that all our relations are extremely smooth. There are many investors and entrepreneurs who are willing to pay taxes, those who are not very willing, but nevertheless, we doing spatial development plan, we first made the inventory of those lands along the Kiev highway going through our village, and made the commercial assessment or commercial attractiveness assessment of those land plots to offer them to potential investors. Actually, this had become continuous discussion, and it turned to be the everyday regular everyday work. The spatial development is the instrument which allows to satisfy the needs of potential and current investors. Sometimes investors believe that the land plots belong to them. And when they find out that they can do nothing with this land because of the designation of this land to this or that need in previous master plan, they become angry and start disputes with local authorities. So I see this novelty that in your spatial development plan, you have to designate lands in line with your vision of your development, and to make these decisions without expectation that in some bright moment in future some big investor might show up. No, you should start to work with what you have today. Today we are discussing land relations, and we had discovered, I think this is like in many other local communities. And we have an experience of bad investor. This investor showed up, made an attempt to work with our sugar plant, and then disappeared without paying even taxes. That this has brought us to idea that when an investor, such investor comes to a local community and wishes to work on this, with this sugar plant, the land should be automatically subordinated to the local community and allow local community to take taxes from this investor for this land, even before he disappears. What could you advise about water resources, whether you had any problems or any disputes? Quite recently, we had amended legislation on the use of water resources, how they could be rented or leased. And now we are finalizing the draft resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers about modern agreement for the rent or lease of water resources by local communities. And about bad investors, of course, I would like to emphasize that this new law which will be passed, it would allow local communities to counteract to those who occupy unlawfully the lands near local communities, and also fight against those who use actually the land or resources which are on the territory of the local community, and using the loopholes in previous legislation, deviates from tax payments. So I can assure you that Geocadastre is ready to step into play its role, being signaled about such bad investors who commit losses to the local communities. By the way, now we have a good practice. Allows us to impose the fines or request for the payment of losses. And actually, if any investor or entrepreneur uses communal land, he is liable, and he has to comply with Article 112 of the Civil Code of Ukraine, and is subject to the tax payments or land payments. And actually, you may demand the investors to pay for the land use based on not only on the new legislation, but even based on the civil law of Ukraine. That is what I would like to mention today. I know many cases when local communities try to sue such bad investors in to court, and I simply advise you to take this as the payment of losses. Thank you very much for your advice. That is the same court tactics which we follow, and quite often rather successfully. Yes, we may apply for the payment of losses, but when an investor buys some real estate property on the land which actually belongs to the community, this land should immediately require the payment of taxes. I understand, but for you to gain this right to lease this land to the investor, you should immediately gain the property right for this land when the national government sells this, for example, plant on the land to any potential investor. Thank you very much for your intervention, for your willingness to develop your community. Please remain with us, and you will be able to ask questions. For the questions, while I would like to introduce now another community which also had carried out the spatial development plan and involved its own resources. This is Novoproska local community from Kirovohrad region. We have Halina Rishitnyak.
Good afternoon, greetings to everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. The only thing I would like to ask you, what changes are you waiting for? And can you implement what you've achieved in your cadastral work and special work? Yes, we've managed to reflect all information on development, engineering, infrastructure, and also agricultural lands and forest and field lands. We have information on this, and we implement knowledge that was provided to us, and we really benefited from spatial planning. And what were the difficulties in the course of the project? We didn't face many difficulties. We were lucky. We had all the maps that we got from the former collective farms. And these maps and documents, they were handed over to us. They were available. And also we filed some requests to some organizations, and they all provided information, so we didn't face many problems. We had great cooperation with the program, and we are really grateful. They really helped us. We may say that the basis that we had, this topographic base that was developed in 1988, and we needed to update it to show a real situation concerning lands and facilities, and we are really grateful. And we are really grateful that we were able, due to the project, to carry out this spatial planning. And Novoproska community unites 11 villages. And this is 363 square kilometers of village council. And what else can I say? What can I tell you? We have agricultural farms. We have 34 farms on our territory, 5 unions, big ones. Agricultural products are produced, and the main lands are cultivated in Хшарівське, Фантазівське, Південне, Норк-Луч та Колос. And these are our main producers of agricultural produce. And they support us, and we support them. And we implement our wishes, our dreams together. And tell us, please, how did you take into account the interests of your local investors when you developed this territorial special planning? Did you have such some public discussions? Yes, we had public discussions of this issue. We took into account wishes of people, of our main representatives. We've discussed all the issues that were proposed by them. So we discussed these issues concerning spatial planning, and we had also this discussion through the site. We sent the information to the ministries, and they sent also letters to us that we have a really great project. Thank you for support of this project and for high assessment of results. Also, I would like to say that in communities, this process of publicity raises a lot of questions and concerns, because it is difficult to go to people and to say that the changes will be implemented and we need this. Often there is a big obstacle for the heads of the communities, and we and the local self-government bodies, we should spread this practice of public discussion and involvement of local investors to some decision-making in the communities. And we should use open sources of information that are available, that are accessible, those public registers and cadasters. Thank you very much, Galina. And I would like to ask Anatoly one more question. As of today, We have law on national infrastructure of geodetic and spatial data. And communities have topography, maps, and other data. How to make this information public using this portal? And
the national portal of geospatial data is a truly powerful instrument which would allow the local communities to manage properly their land resources. Quite recently, the CMU resolution was passed, and it sets the structure of the geospatial data that will be contained in the portal, geospatial portal. The portal was launched in test mode. Many local communities had connected to it, and the Department of Cartography and Georesources is responsible for the maintenance of this portal, and I would encourage the local communities to use this portal as much as possible. So if local communities want to use and to post their resources in this portal, where they should address to the administrator of the geocadastre in our ministry, and I would encourage the local governments to apply to this portal, to apply for the submission of the information. I believe that this will promote investments in your territories, because for investors it's quite convenient to find out what land resources are available for them in your community. I have a couple of additional questions. One of them is to Sergei. Are you still here with us? According to Article 50 on the law of Ukraine about land division, the change of the land assignment for the construction, you have to supplement the architectural and construction information, and also comment whether this land plot could be used for this very construction based on the master plan of the territorial community. And in many places and in many local communities, this had become a problem. Yes, now we are finalizing the standard model for such supplements, which have to be submitted together with the investment decision for construction on the community lands. This law, which we discussed today, it allows the local communities to change the assignment of lands in line with the newly passed spatial development plan. As far as I can see, we have a lot of questions. We are trying to group them in several groups. Now, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Tatiana Нужда, expert moderator of the platform Rural Development of the Ukrainian Association of Local Communities. A question to you, whether our local communities are prepared and ready to the transparency in land management of the local communities. Some people expressed opinion that we had curbed the corruption at the top level, while the corruption related to land resources had gone to the lower levels in local communities. Thank you, Katerina, for your question. I believe that heads of local communities, leaders of local communities will find many new opportunities on the one hand, and on the other hand, they will face many risks and responsibilities. In the past, it was sufficient to submit just a document signed by one person. Now you have to request for a decision taken by collegiate body, by the decision of the local self-government, and in order to do this, you have to bring together these local members of government, and they have to vote, and then this has to be registered in the proper documents. So while in the past this allowed any possibility for corruption when it was signed just by one person, now with this collegiate voting, there are almost no chances for corruption. Would you please promote a bit your association? What issues can you resolve, and how you can help? On our National Association of Association of Local Communities, we have the platform which is called Rural Development. One section of it is devoted to the rural economy. On the other hand, we provide support on the land issues and collect the best practices base, the best practices bank even, and you may find on our platform the solution of best practice which matches your conditions in the best way. And we also prepare analytical opinions about standard situations we may offer also consultations from our experts on specific issues in local communities. If we have such issues, you may approach to us. Actually, the entire territory of Ukraine is now covered by this reform of the land resources, and we have branches almost everywhere. We encourage you to come to us. In October, we carried out the survey. First stage of it was about responsibilities of local communities. The second survey was about transfer of land from the state property to communal property. The third survey was about forest stripes in the local communities, and the fifth was about transfer of lands into the property and ownership of local communities. So the biggest success was gained by the topic about transferring lands from geocadastre to the local communities. And later on, our land forum, which we announced on our platform, had become very popular, and we had signed a memorandum with the State Service of Geocadastre. Alexander Korindey, the leader of our association, insisted that in the memorandum, one sentence is included that our association should cooperate with Geocadastre, striving to resolve the issues related to the land ownership and management. And actually, this allows local communities to approach to and have a dialogue with the Geocadastre via our association. During that forum, we also agreed with Geocadastre to organize a series of webinars for our local communities. The first webinar was devoted to the steps that should be taken by a local community when they are accepting the land into their management. And this webinar allowed both representatives of Geocadastre and those communities who already have their lands transferred to share their experience. The second webinar was devoted purely to the best practices in those communities which succeeded in gaining the lands into their property. And due to that webinar, we managed to present these best practices on our portal. And one more important topic is the forest strips, the forest lands in the local communities. And we delivered a series of webinars devoted to this topic. Also, another topics of our webinars are devoted to the legal issues, how to get more revenues from land, how to act and how to draft all the documentation properly. And in the fall last year, we delivered a special course in land resources for land experts or land administrators in the local communities. In course of that training, which was held online, we got a lot of questions from local authorities, which allowed us to approach with all those questions to Geocadastre. We had more than 28 participants from 26 regions in Ukraine, from 26 local communities, and they underwent the full cycle of training and got certificates. And one more webinar, which collected more than 750 registrations, and more than 200 participants were in our Zoom session at that webinar, devoted to the practical issues of land management, and this allowed us to systematize the frequently asked questions and summarizing our experience of training and recollecting the questions, I should say that people started to realize that practical work in local land departments is very much different from the work in local self-governance. This our online school and group of experts under our association came to conclusion that the exchange with best practices and sharing experiences is of primarily importance. The land experts from local communities had requested for special training with architects, and I believe this is a sign of success. Our association had launched in February the new project, Regional Week. Each week on Monday, we start to work with a district local regional government and establish our branch in this district, then bring together local authorities, representatives from different aspects, that is land, resources, taxes, planning, economy, local economy, etc. We bring them together and organize special consultations. All that events and practices which I had mentioned, they could be found on our website in a section News. Ukrainian Association of Local Territorial Communities is welcoming the newly passed law, and we believe that we are able to maintain efficient communication between the local communities and central government, and we are able to assist local communities in this moment when they are gaining new and important powers, and allow them to impose their supervision over their communal lands in their territories. Thank you very much. I believe that training of land experts in local communities is of primarily importance because we today try to master new technologies, new legislation, etc. Listening to you, I had reviewed the questions and found out that we have two big groups of questions about common pastures, communal pastures, and the second group of questions is about forest lands in local communities. And this communal pastures, they had become the biggest problem, because in the past nobody bothered to register this, like communal pastures, and how to balance the interests within the local communities.
This problem is painful. There is a law. It envisages that land plot is not provided to ownership. This is the reserve land. And people may get them in the course of privatization without any expense. And if you don't mind, I may speak about this issue in more detail. If not, we are speaking not only about woodline and the pastures. We may say that there are lands that are now in communal property, and there is a threat that these lands will be privatized free of charge. Why this is a threat? Because for communities, communities are not interested that all the communal lands be distributed among private persons. So there is a contradiction and conflict of interests. If you're speaking about broader prospects, and when we are speaking about society on the whole, society is interested in strong communities. Without land resource, strong community is impossible. Also, we understand that, unfortunately, so, for example, there is a land plot of 2 hectares, and they want to privatize it. These are not the people who need this land the most. And one more argument. Simple arithmetic shows that the state is not capable to implement the promises. In Article 121, then the state promises 2 hectares of land for agriculture or 1,500 for housing, and the number of land plots was promised by the state, but for some reasons, and this is lack of social justice and impossibility to implement the law, and also absence of capabilities in the communities. And I believe that I have a negative attitude towards free of charge privatization. So the state should not provide this land for free to people. They should not provide these hectares to people. And this is not in the interest of communities. So we should form recommendations of what communities should do in order not to lose these lands, how to prevent this, because these lands may just be lost and be provided for free. The community should identify who needs these lands the most. These are veterans, families of those who died in combat. So there are some lands, and they should be provided to the members of the community who need them the most. And by this, local self-government bodies may stop this free provision of land, and they may include these lands in the list of land plots. The rights for this, they should be preserved, and Article 136 envisages this, and this decision will legally prevent free of charge privatization. And from the other side, this is a useful step that will lead to the fact that land plots will be provided to lease based on auction, and this will be done in the interests of communities, and they will work for the communities. So first, the decision should be taken on those lands that will be auctioned. So also there is a comprehensive plan that is envisaged by Law 711, and this may help to prevent this free of charge privatization. Speaking about remote prospects, State Geocadastre worked on the draft law on monetization of right for free of charge privatization of land plots. This is not a simple task, and the state cannot provide money to everyone, but a compromise is possible, and we believe that legislators will support us. This is a very unpopular issue. Everyone wants to be good to everyone, but we do not have enough land to provide to everyone 2 hectares. And people, maybe they want to have 2 hectares near Kiev, right near Kiev, better even in Krishchanik Street, right in the center. But this is not about social justice. This is about corruption. Such a mechanism cannot be efficient. We believe that communities will better manage this burden of responsibility of free of charge privatization than the officials of Geocadastre organization. That's why we believe that all these lands should be provided to communities, and one more step should be made. We should get rid of this chaotic provision of lands, and proper order should be in these things, because there is risk of corruption here. And we want to ask the parliament, and we should be supported first by the cabinet of ministers, and we hope that this will happen. And this is about privatization. Going back to pastures, there are lands and grass and cows, but these are lands of reserve. How to prevent the loss? If the council wants to use this land as a public pasture, if not through bidding, then by spatial planning, these lands should be referred to the land of general use, and they should provide proper documents that the land plots cannot be allocated there, and in this way they may close this issue. From me, I would like to say that those life hacks mentioned by Anatoly, we should have them. First of all, we should understand that the land may be exhausted, and we cannot give it to everyone. It's a cool idea to monetize it, because 75%, according to statistics, of those who implemented their rights, they sell these land plots during half year. People do not plan to carry out agricultural work. They just want money for land. And Anatoly also mentioned spatial planning. Once again, I would like to remind to you that communities should use this measure properly, because due to this measure, the community will be able not only to reserve the territory for development, they will be able to change the intended use of lands. Also, they will have opportunity to broaden the barriers of the territory and to involve investors. And due to the development of communities will depend on proper documentation, proper planning. So please use the instruments at hand and grow your own specialists. And you should train them, and there are a lot of opportunities for training. And State Geocadastre organization, they hold courses, and they provide explanation. This is really important. Those specialists that will work in the communities, these are people who will be able to bring this information to people directly to your residents of the community and to involve them into the process of decision making. So many of you do not have this. Many of you do not have the spatial planning, and starting 24th of July, you may use this instrument. And please include all land plots that are potentially interesting for you and investors that can be used for the development of your territory. Include them in order that your community are able to develop, and also include the number of those lands that may be put to auction. Now the question to Tatiana. You work with communities directly, you know their problems. Please tell us about the most important issues concerning forest lines, and what are the most important topics concerning these forest lines.
Thank you for your question. As I mentioned, in late 2020, we had a survey, special survey, and related to the communal forests in local communities, and we clarified the frequently asked questions. We brought together the experts who explained how this should be addressed, and on our portal you may find presentations prepared by those experts, and quite recently we delivered the webinar devoted to specific works, specific actions that should be carried out by local communities in woodlines. And in June, in early June, we will have one of such specific discussions. Also, I would like a question about special woodlines which protect fields. When the collective farms are cancelled, you may register the woodlines surrounding the former collective farm fields as a property of local community in the geocadastre, and then take your responsibility over these woodlines, because the main function of woodlines is to prevent lands from erosion, fieldlands, farmlands from erosion. And then that's the responsibility of local community to decide whether they would like to establish local land authority which would maintain these woodlines, whether they would outsource these woodlines for further economic activity. So I have to warn you that local governments have to keep an eye on the woodlines and to preserve them in a focus of their attention. Perhaps you know that Lviv region they have very proactive local communities, and Maria from local community shared her experience. We had registered all the communal pastures by decision of the Lviv region and assigned them to specific community, and then authorized the special company to produce all the documentation and register the communal pastures, which totally amounts to 160 hectares in Lviv region. This is our positive experience, and we may encourage you to do this. I also may advise you to approach to Poltava region, to Lidivska community, where the leader of this community shared their positive experience. You may find this on our portal. The next block of our questions is addressed to the representatives of expert communities. When local communities start the land management activity, they need these experts, land experts, and because there are a lot of issues to be resolved, and the law which we are discussing today sets some requirements to this engineers, land engineers. I am happy to give the floor to Ksenia Druzhinina, deputy head of the All-Ukrainian Union of Certified Land Engineers. Thank you for invitation. I believe that land engineers and our Association of Land Engineers had been waiting for this reform in land designation and land assignment for a long period of time, because in the past, unfortunately, the procedure was extremely cumbersome. It required a lot of coordination, etc., and it required collection of many documents that had to be outsourced beyond the capacity of the land engineers. And this draft law number 1423, which proves to be the one of the most radical laws in our land reform, the deregulation in land organization had happened, or land administration had happened. So first of all, compulsory expertise of the land administration documentation is abolished. The digitalization of these procedures had become a good option, and all the procedures, land assessment, land measuring, etc., will be submitted to geocadastre in digital form. The land evaluation opinion also will be submitted to the land fund authority in digital form, which is a big relief. About those documents that land engineers were not responsible for, but which provide for corruption. That is, if some mistakes in the land registration were found, the land engineer could be deprived from their certificate while it was not his or her fault. Then several additional deregulation steps were introduced. Ukrainian land law provides that transportation of fruitful layer of soils beyond the boundaries of the same land plot should not be documented or additionally registered. But when developing your projects, you need to pay attention at the economic assignment of lands, economic designation of lands. Also, I would like to mention amendments to the law of Ukraine on geocadastre. This amendment sets special requirements as to the form, content, and the template of this document, and the land engineers have to keep in mind that the digital documents should comply with this model form, so to say. And we expect to get changes and amendments to this model template. As of now, we had canceled the procedure of coordination of your documentation with the land authorities. This could be easily done via online resources. That is, this allows the geocadastre to check your boundaries, which you indicated in your submitted form, before introducing it to the land cadastre. And based on this check, within the same day, they have to provide you with a qualified answer, whether yes or no, and explain why. I believe that all those amendments would prevent corruptive actions. That this actually allow you to act via digital services. This also sets guarantees for openness and transparency of all the land cadastre issues. And also sets clear limited periods for this transaction. What else I would like to mention? Local self-governments now have the possibility to finance the land service, land registration, and land designation for construction and development by themselves. This may considerably speed up the process for investors. The working projects will be approved by those people, by those who are making decisions. Actually, cancellation of all the unnecessary red tape, bureaucratic load, and danger of bribes were now liquidated, and my expectation is that this will considerably cut down the period required for land registration in geocadastre. And of course, now territorial communities have big opportunities, and they now have a big responsibility. And now this big responsibility falls on those who prepare documentation. They should be well trained, they should be good professionals, and they have to be honest and trustworthy people. And as employees of geocadastre, we will supervise the compliance of land engineers with the norms of the new law. Thank you very much. It was very useful to understand how the experts, how the land engineers perceive the new authorities. All that digitalization, one-click approval, and all the abolished red tape and the cancellation of extra documents, of course, will speed up the process. And now about the boundaries of local communities. The boundaries had become a topical issue. Anatoly, I would invite you to answer this question about boundaries. Today, everybody understands that they have submitted the information about boundaries to geocadastre.
Changes will happen half a year, and there will be new documents on land management concerning boundary survey, and based on this documentation you will be able to enter this information to state cadastre, and after this you will be able to get the certificate. And we are waiting for this changes to be in place, and that this functionality will be introduced soon. Those communities who plan to do this, do they need to collect some documents to prepare to something? Because at the moment, everyone has some concerns that those who first come, first served, so they are at the low start. When should they do it to fix the boundaries in cadastre? Maybe you will provide some advice to community to get prepared. And the inventory was mentioned several times today, and I would like to repeat the recommendation to quickly and with high quality to carry out inventarization of lands and community, and this will result in establishment of the boundaries. This happens not in vacuum. It is related to some boundaries of existing land plots. That's why the information should be precise concerning the lands of the community on the whole. Then it will be easier to carry out this process of boundary settlement in communities. And I have one more question to you. Today, the registration of boundaries in cadastre is separated in two procedures. long and costly, and simple and fast. When they have this planning in communities, and this is for 80% of territory, and they undergo easy procedure. They register the file in cadastre, and they do not have problems. Maybe today the community should think concerning this plan for the territory, and whether it will influence the boundaries in all the territories. All documents should be collected and should be taken into account. If we're speaking about what they should develop these draft projects, maybe no, they should wait for changes that will be introduced by law 23, and then they should work in accordance with this law. Also, there is an important problem, and I believe that it's uncomfortable to speak about it, and often they modestly keep calm on this. There are some types of division. Some units of administrative and territorial development and communities are not mentioned in this list. There are only settlements, towns, cities. Current situation does not correspond to constitution, and we cannot develop bylaws if there is no such a point in constitution. First, we were speaking about the territories of the councils as administrative units that were inherited from the times of the Soviet Union. After this, there were changes in the code, land code, and only settlements were included, and this issue of comprehensive application of self-government was not properly implemented, and now there are some movements, but this list of administrative and territorial units, it didn't change. And we cannot call the territory of the community as administrative and territorial unit. So there are problems with these responsibilities, and there will be problems concerning introduction of information to cadastre, and there should be inventory. We should get ready. We should account everything properly. We should hire proper personnel. But associations, unions that unite self-government bodies and representatives of civil society and representatives of bodies of state power, they should voice this problem. This territory of territorial community, it should be legalized concerning division as an administrative and territorial unit. This is not only changes to constitution. This may be done by some bylaws, by the interpretation. It can be proven. If we say, for example, settlement, village, town, city, maybe we mean territory of the community, not only the territory of the settlement or several settlements, but also the territory around them. So these terms may be used in different meanings, but something should be done about this. And I would like to call on this. So these boundaries issue is very important, and we hope that the opportunities instruments that are provided by the current legislation, that these instruments will be used by communities, and they will be register the boundaries in state cadastre, and they will become full-fledged owners of the territory. So we thank our participants for their useful advice, for their own positions, and for their careful attitude towards these issues. And I thank you for questions. Maybe we didn't answer to all questions, but we were trying to answer all your questions. And in this panel, I would like to say the words of Taras Shevchenko: fight and you will win. Why so? Because you should fight for resources. You should fight for your territory, not in the physical sense, but you should understand what you have on your territory and how you can use it. We passed some part of our way, but we need to go further, and we wish you efficient decisions and to have real professionals by your side.